Hi everyone, I'm Toby from Ealing and Hounslow CBS, and thanks for joining the Community Advisory Board meeting for housing campaigning. I'm just going to let a few more people in and then we can start the meeting, but lovely to see everyone. Right, just let a few more people in. So the agenda today, and I can see already, hi Sharon, we've got Sharon from the London Tenants Federation. She's going to start off chatting, and then I'm hoping we've got hopefully Councillor Chital Munro from Ealing Council. And then later on we've got Neve Rawdon, who is from Hounslow Council, and she's going to be talking about she's head of engagement for the estate regeneration activity that's happening in Hounslow. So really keen to hear about that, in particular to find out how she's like engaging with BAME community and thinking about engaging with people who perhaps English isn't their first language. I think it'd be really interesting to see how that's progressing, and maybe we can share some insight from that with Ealing Council, because I expect you will probably know that Ealing Council is meant to be producing a local housing plan, which is good news. But there's going to be a consultation process, and I'm really keen to find out from Ealing Council about what this consultation process will involve. Exactly how are they going to consult local people and about their engagement strategy. So that's why I thought it'd be a really good time to bring in Hounslow and Neve, who's it sounds like she's got a lot of insight into that, and maybe she can share some best practice with Ealing Council. Also, I'm going to be talking about my new website, Pitch West London. I've been carrying out some training with some local groups, community groups, supporting the BAME communities in Ealing and Hounslow. So I've been doing training with them on our campaigning and how to use Twitter, and we're going to be starting with that activity very soon. So I just thought it'd be interesting to show everyone how I'm progressing with that, and if people want to promote that site, because it's also a signposting site to housing advice in general, as well as training resources, everything you need really to be able to carry out housing campaigning. So that is the agenda, and so we're going to start with Sharon from the London Tenants Federation, and I've got a presentation that I'm going to share. So I'm just going to share my screen, and here it is. So Sharon, thank you very much for joining, and over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting us, Toby. I know I tried to. We were going to come next last time, and I think I failed on that one, or we failed on it. I think we had miscommunication on the times and everything. So hopefully, yeah, I hope people will enjoy the kind of presentation and some discussion about the London Tenants Federation. So I should say, I mean, if you have a look on this front slide here, we often say that we try to link the local to the regional, which is because the Mayor of London has a lot of strategic housing and planning policy that impacts on us all at the local level. So our organisation tries to bring together tenants groups where they have a lot of experience at the local level to understand a lot more and to engage in policy at the regional level. So we understand the relationships between the local and the regional. There's a few kind of logos down the bottom of the screen, and they're people who are either funding us at present, or will be, or have done in the past, or will be by December of this year. So in December of this year, all of those organisations will be funding us. So there's Trust for London, which is also, I think, funding, Toby, your project.
That's correct, yes, Trust for London.
And that's being match funded by the Tudor Trust And we also have some this time, which is kind of new for us, from Oak Foundation. And so, yeah, we're pleased to engage with them all. Shall we go on to the next slide then, Toby? So just to say, we're an independent social housing tenants organisation. We were first funded in 2002 by what was then the Association of London Government. I mean, it's now called London Councils, and it has a bit of a different way of behaving or working. But that London Council's roots was within the ALG. And the London Tenants Federation was first set up with a part-time worker in 2002. And originally the membership was based on the kind of local authority, borough-wide tenants organisations and federations that were widely spread across London at that time. And maybe there are less of those borough-wide networks now. And we tend now to represent a range of different borough, landlord and neighbourhood-wide social housing tenants groups, council, housing association, cooperative and tenant managed organisations. So we've got quite a wide mix anyway. And from next year, and well, I guess really we will be opening up a membership that will be accessible for individual tenants and residents associations, tenant managed organisations and tenant cooperatives. So we're trying to widen out, and we might do a number of sort of sub-regional events within that. So maybe, Toby, that's something we could talk to you about, of maybe doing something that's a joint event of some sort. So we're, at the moment, we set up as a company limited by guarantee in 2012, and we're currently applying to become a charity, which we'd be really pleased to do. I don't know whether, I mean, I'm the coordinator for London Tenants Federation, and we've had at times I work part-time. No, I work full-time, but I'm paid part-time. And we've got two other members of staff who will be joining us in December, two part-time members of staff. So that will make us grow a wee bit. So what do we do? Well, we aim to try and provide a strong voice for social housing tenants in London, and particularly focus, as I said before, on the Mayor of London and his policies on housing and planning and how that affects us locally. But I have to say, from 2007, we lobbied the Mayor's office to try and establish a forum for both tenants of different tenures and other community groups to engage directly with officers from his office. And we achieved that in May of 2019, when the London Housing Panel was set up. So that's facilitated in part, funded in part by the Mayor's office and in part by Trust for London. And we have membership of that panel. It's longer term standing may be at risk at the moment. The Mayor's talked about how difficult it is to retain the funding for the panel, but we think it's been a very useful way for a lot of tenants and that sort of social housing tenants and other community groups to engage with the Mayor's office. Thank you, Toby. LTF reps are often invited to speak at committee meetings and other committees for the London Assembly. And people may or may not know the London Assembly has a role in scrutinising what the Mayor of London does. Into the policy of the Mayor's office and around what's happening in London. And in 2008, we organised a special meeting with them for tenants from across London to meet with members of the committee around their investigation into the tenant involvement in decision making and particularly focused on post-Grenfell. But the committee's report covered a lot of the work that we did around that. And you can, if you want to, you can read the report and its recommendations, which is called Hearing Residents' Voices in Social Housing, from the GLA's website. I mean, we can give, Toby, if people are interested, we can give people links to these.
Yep, that sounds good.
Right. So shall we move on to the next one? Planning is not usually a thing that many local authority tenants engage with. But some years ago, we had a member from Southwark who was very interested in planning policy and how this impacts so much on housing that we should get involved. And so now every time a mayor of London develops a new London plan, we try and engage with all of the consultations. And the consultations can go on for a long time. There will be written consultations, and then a big discussion at City Hall with an independent planning inspector, organising sort of formal discussions on the content of the London plan and its various policies. So these are some of the London Tenants Federation representatives who were at the examination in public back in 2019. And they attended in total either 19 full days or half days at the examination. So we attended a lot of the discussions on housing need, the targets the mayor sets for housing, and large-scale developments and regeneration. They were some of the things that we engaged in. The London Tenants Federation holds open meetings and events. So some of these might be on particular issues that are out for consultation. So as people may probably know, there's been an awful lot on changes or potential changes in fire safety from the national level particularly. And we held 2 events on that. And we had a guy called Stuart Hodkinson, who's from Leeds University. And he came along and did a fantastic presentation for us. And we had some workshop discussions. And as a result of that, around 50 tenants associations and tenant management organisations who attended then made responses to the consultation. And we also hold annual conferences that are open to tenants and resident representatives from across London. Thank you, Toby. We lobby for more social housing, social rented housing particularly. And these are some of the graphs and charts that we kind of produce around that. So the one with the large chunk of orange, this shows how much of the kind of what we call the backlog of need for housing in London. That means the number where people are already waiting for housing but haven't got any. And currently the total backlog need for social rented housing in London, this is from 2017, was about 163,000. And it makes up, that amount makes up 78% of the total need. So on this little diagram, the pie chart here, the orange part is the need for social rented homes or backlog need for social rented homes. The little tiny piece there is for shared ownership, and the green, smaller green piece is there for private housing in London. And this is another chart on how much, this is the amount that the mayor says is needed to clear that backlog of need and newly arising need in London, which was around 30,900, just it's almost 31,000 a year. And last year, I can let you know that it was less than 2,000 social rented homes that were delivered. So we're a long, long way behind dealing with all those people that are particularly homeless people who are in temporary accommodation and people living in overcrowded homes. So we produce briefings on issues such as rent increases. We also have very strong links with a number of other London voluntary and community sector groups, including Age UK London, Race on the Agenda, the London Forum of Civic and Amenity Societies, and an organisation called Just Space. We've also got links with university lecturers whose research is around housing and social housing tenants. And we recently had two academics, one from Newcastle and one from Derby, coming to talk to us about some research that they've been doing into the stigmatisation of social housing in London. And if you want to hear the recording from that, with those two people speaking, there's a link on our website to that as well. What else have we done? We worked on a neighbourhood plan with some tenants in Newham. In the past, we've supported tenants and networks of tenants and other community groups coming together to try and influence or challenge large-scale developments. And the ones we focused on particularly were the Old Oakham Park Royal Development Corporation and the London Legacy Development Corporation areas. So Ealing is within or part of Ealing is a part of that the Old Oakham Park Royal Development Corporation area, and that's not a huge amount of Ealing, but a section of it is. We also put together our own policies. So, I mean, this is tenants' policies. So we held a couple of conferences in a 2-year period, and then spent a lot of time bringing all that information together and then taking it out to people again to make sure that they were happy with the policies that we were putting together. So our document is called A Positive Future for Social Housing in London, the London Tenants Manifesto, and that's another one that can be found on our website. As people here who are going to be listening to information around regeneration or redevelopment in Hounslow and some in Ealing, I guess, as well, we developed with Just Space a website called Estate Watch London, which gives a lot of information about the number of homes that are due to be demolished in London. And it has a page with some resources for residents. So might be something that some of the people who are here, who are residents, might be interested in. Thank you, Toby. I think that will do.
That's great.
Ask any questions?
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was really interesting. God, I didn't quite realize the extent of your activities, and sounds like you're really influential in so many different areas. Yeah, really interesting.
Hope to.
Hopefully, yeah. So I'm going to open it out, and anyone with a question for Sharon?
Is that Libby? I know Libby. Is she there?
She is, yep.
Sharon, I just had a question quickly. Nice to meet. I'm Rena. I run a community organisation in Southall, which is an area in Ealing. Yeah. And I'm actually really interested in to hear more about your involvement with the London plan and how you guys informed it, because I know recently there's been a new London plan that's been implemented, and it has quite a lot written on tall buildings and a kind of real change in policy in relation to requirements in terms of density and being near travel hubs. And that's a really big issue in Southall, as we have the Crossrail here. So basically huge tall buildings are being allowed to build with very little requirements being put on density because of the new London plan. So it's interesting to hear how you guys fed into that.
So I think in terms of the density levels, we weren't invited to that particular section of the discussions at the IP. Definitely we were on housing targets and housing needs, and we spent a lot of time on the workshops or the discussions on regeneration. But a lot of our members are very, very concerned about the higher levels of density. across London. I mean, the mayor will say, well, this is the level of need, and this is how we might achieve that you know, delivering that level of need. But as we know, there's actually very little. That the greatest need in London is for social rented homes, and that's not what's being achieved by increasing kind of overall numbers of homes. So yes, it's a very, very difficult issue, Rena. I'm not sure how to kind of make you feel any better about it, really. And I think we're all, wherever we live, we're going to find this, that there are going to be very high increases in the numbers of homes that are going to be squashed into ever smaller spaces.
Yeah, and then what are you guys doing in relation to kind of finding a way to get people to have a voice in housing? Because like you said, you guys are kind of joining into planning right now, like trying to expand your reach in planning. And like for me, when I've been researching this a lot, I find that planning is a huge part in forming housing and like how housing kind of developments happen, especially in areas where there is little political participation. Planning is like the main area where we're kind of supposed to have a voice. So what have you found any challenges in terms of like in getting people involved in planning?
Yes, huge challenges, because
Yeah.
I mean, the planning policy is in such difficult technical kind of language. So obviously what we try to do, and I suppose with the London plan, there are many years of working up to actually getting to an examination in public, or even sending in responses to consultation. So we spent a lot of time on holding events, meetings, drafting up easier to read briefings on the kinds of policies that our members were saying that they were most concerned about. So it's, but it isn't an easy, it's not, there's no easy answer to this. We work very closely with another organisation called Just Space, who Libby also knows, and they bring together a number of groups that are involved in planning policy, from the very local level to the regional level. So we've found, or our members have found, that by being members of Just Space, it also gives them big opportunities for peer learning, and for kind of hearing about how different groups are tackling issues in different areas.
Yeah, no, that sounds really.
At some stage, if you're trying to bring something together around either a local planning policy, a new local plan, for example, or the next time there might be alterations or a new London plan, get in touch with us, and also get in touch with Just Space.
Yeah, no, I definitely will be, because I'm really involved in planning, and I'm trying to understand, like, especially in Southall, how all these planning decisions are going ahead with very little input from people. And I'm learning more about pre-application discussions and stuff. That's a very big thing in relation to tall buildings. And it's all very kind of like smoke and mirrors almost. And it's very hard to know where a community can have a voice. And I'm working with developers, and yeah, I'll definitely reach out to you now in the chat, and I'll share my email, because there are some contacts I'd love to get from you in relation to this stuff.
Okay. I mean, I think it obviously gets easier bit by bit, but it is very technical and very difficult sometimes just to understand what the policy sections are saying. And if you're dealing with people who are in lower income or hard to reach, then it's much, much more difficult. And for people who are maybe not originally from here, it's much, much more difficult for people to understand and get what the language itself means. But
this is what I've been trying to draw to the attention of Ealing Council, and now, because they're saying they're going to start a consultation, that's why I wanted them to talk about this. And I can see that no one from Ealing Council has joined us just yet. You never know, there's a bit of time yet, but yeah, this is central to all sorts of consultations and planning, that people know about the process, they know how it connects to the London plan, and it is so complicated. And as Rena says, it's all smoke and mirrors. So I do hope, yeah, maybe we can work together and kind of, because now it's very instrumental time, particularly for Ealing, with if they are going to do a consultation. So yeah, Libby, you've got your hand up.
We're working on, the local plan has had its, I think it's on its third, probably hopefully not false start. They haven't actually rewritten it since 2013. Well, they wrote it before that. It hasn't been done since then. They have had a problem because they haven't produced any authority monitoring reports since 2014. It's been a big hold up. And in fact, we've taken to the Ombudsman about that. But for Southall, Kay and Will French, who I work with on Ealing Matters, they're going to the Southall Matters meeting Thursday the 28th, I can't remember the time, to talk about AMRs and the local plan and what's happening. And we publish the local plan meetings on the Ealing Matters Facebook page, so it's always there. And they're having two a month. So once you get into one, you'll find out when the next one is. They haven't spoken about density in towers yet, but I think that's probably the next one, the one after. But they're really naughty. You have to register to speak, and they want to know what question you're going to ask. You just say, I have a right to ask a question, and I don't know what it is.
Here comes Councillor Tariq Mahmood. I'm just admitting him now, so that's...
well, anyway, so you can do that, but the consultation they talk about is when they've got everything done, and then they just go out and say, we're consulting with you, this is what we're going to do. So it's really important to get in now. And as I say, well, if you go to the Southall Matters meeting next week, Kate and Will be talking about it in quite great detail. And I can help you as well. I've got your email address. I can give you the dates of the next one and how to follow it and what's happened so far. So it's, do get in there.
No, I'm definitely aware, and I'm working with the council as well. They've actually been really helpful. I have a lot of contacts in the council in the planning department, and I'm trying to piece things together. And also I'm working with the head of planning on kind of me being an ambassador in Southall almost. I'm going to get updates on when the local plan consultations happen, so I can share it with a database of people I have in Southall. Well, but it's more kind of understanding, where do people have a voice? For example, developer just had a kind of consultation with people in Southall about a development, and they had like talks with the council prior, and it was kind of like, okay, hi locals in Southall, please give us your views on how we use this commercial space. And it was like, that was the remit within which locals could give their view around the commercial space, not around the density of the building, not around what the building will look like, not around how the building will be formed, but just about what the commercial space will be used for. And it's kind of like, I'm trying to understand, where are we allowed to have a voice? Because it seems that the developers are kind of dictating where we have a voice, which is slightly worrying to me.
Yeah. Rena, can I interrupt that? What they have done is they've had pre-application conversations with the planning officers. They have decided what they're going to do. They have to consult with you, but you have to be very careful. They have to consult with you about everything, and they have to do it properly. So we've just made Friary Park, the developers there, reconsult because they didn't do it properly. And we had a big argument with them last Friday. The MP came along, and now they are having to do the whole consultation again, because it's just like you could only respond to it if you lived within about 2 roads of this development, where they're going to add another 25 stories to an already planning permission 20-something stories, no more social housing or anything else. And we force them now into reconsulting. So it has to be a proper consultation. Again, we can give you help with, or Sharon can give you help with what is a proper consultation.
How do you force them to reconsult then?
We shouted and screamed at them.
Right, like that.
So the company, I shall tell this, and I don't mind that the councillor is on. So the company that did the consultation is now employs our ex-leader, who is still a councillor on the planning committee. Note well. Anyway, we just said it's not on. We would go to the press. One of the people on that group actually works for the BBC, which is quite handy. And we just said it won't do. It breaks all the rules. You have to do it properly. You can't just consult with 2 roads. This affects everybody for a mile radius, because it's going to be 35 stories. and we did that, and with other stuff as well. I've just the emails came back from this afternoon. I haven't had time to read them yet, but yeah. So you just have to stand your ground, and you need more than one person. But I mean, there's a lot of people in Southall Matters like Joe and people like that who are really good and know what they're doing on this. I mean, they stopped the sale of the town hall going through, and they worked really hard on that. So there are people in Southall who know. But then last night at the planning meeting, there was nobody objecting to anything. So, but it's a lot to do, and you can't do it on your own. You do need lots of people with you, and you need to get the Southall Matters group together, the Gasworks group online with you, so you support each other. You can't do it all on your own.
I understand. I think for me, it's more like piecing together a story and then acting on it versus just going straight into action. So that's what I'm kind of doing behind the scenes, but it's definitely interesting. I'll definitely go to the meeting on the 28th.
Right,
and
okay.
There are a lot of it's interesting to hear about that developer thing that you said, because I'm actually on the community review panel, and
oh, great.
It was something that I made a strong argument for in the last panel, and it was something that the panel chair made very strong an argument about as well. So I think, you know, with my ties with Ealing, you know, people I have talked to were really nice, and yeah. I'm just coming from a place where I don't want to be combative as much as I want to be collaborative, because I just want people who can help me find solutions, versus because I don't have time to fight anyone. I only have time to fix things. If I can fix things behind the scenes, I'll try and do that as much as I can, but I'm also going to up campaigning efforts and getting people involved, because that's really important to me.
I think you'll find Sue New on the community review panel with you. She's very good. Did you come across Sue?
Not Sue.
Sue New. She's about my age. She's in her 70s, but she's disabled, so she's a long
she's disabled.
She's very, very good and very knowledgeable. So that's a good contact to have.
Yeah, no, and I think it'll be interesting. I can see Nima's here now. I want to hear what Hounslow's been doing as an market comparison as well.
Before we move on to Neve, who I see has joined us, thank you very much. Just going to say thank you very much to Sharon for presenting. Really interesting. It's great we're getting a conversation going here, and hopefully we can work together more closely in the future. But before we go to Neve, I'm just going to introduce Councillor Tariq Mahmood. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're just having a bit of an update from Libby in terms of she knew a little bit about the proposed consultation for the local plan for Ealing. But it'd be great if you could give us an update, and also thinking about, and I know this is what I keep on talking about in the past, but it would just be great to know about your strategy for this. And it is to do with consulting and engaging people who perhaps don't speak English as a first language, and perhaps a lot of planning information is very complex. So thinking about offering them the ability to have translations of material, or them being able to access information in a less sort of formal environment. I mean, ideally, I'd love to hear about local shops promoting ways that they could be consulted and things like that. But we're going to hear from Neve in a bit after you about how Hounslow is doing that with their engagement for the regeneration of estates in Hounslow, so we can kind of compare them together. But Councillor Mahmood, if you could give us an update, that would be great.
Thank you so much, to having me. But really, I haven't been attending your meeting for a long time, so I thought I should just. I think I missed a couple of 2 or 3 meetings, so I thought I should just join you. But unfortunately, I haven't had a great deal of time. I have to do some other thing to attend in 10 minutes. But what I will do, I understand your concern and the other concerns as well. And as I said to you before, I'm happy to work with the different community group and with the different organization to make sure everyone is on the board in terms of planning process and our regeneration strategy. And that's the reason we organized the design review panel and community review panel, these 2 different things. I'm happy to update you in the next meeting if you book me in, please, if you forgive me.
Apologies, could I ask a quick question? Councillor Mahmood, do you have any role within the council outside of being a councillor, and what area are you the councillor for?
Oh, I'm a planning committee member, and planning is regeneration is my area.
So you sit on the planning committee for who go and decide on the planning decisions. So do you sit on that committee?
It is correct, yes.
But weren't you on that the other year as well? So are you sitting on it for a second term?
Yes, this is my second term.
Okay. And what area are you the councillor for?
Right, so I'm area of South Greenford, Perryville.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It would also be great because, you know, I have invited a lot of people from, and I appreciate you attending today, but I have invited a lot of people from Ealing Council, and also Ray Wall and Lauren Wall, whose new role within the cabinet is, you know, she's the person who's in charge of genuinely affordable housing. I just think it's a real shame that we're not getting any more participation from Ealing Council when they've been defined these roles, and I've been inviting them, and we're just not getting any participation. I mean, I'm not sure what more we need to do to encourage them to come here. Is there any way, Tarek, that you can encourage them to attend the next one?
Yeah, okay. I will take that message away, and I will talk to Lauren and my colleague Ray Wall. They have got responsibility to deliver genuine affordable homes. But can I just request you, when you are inviting them or inviting me, if you will be specific about that subject, what knowledge or what information will be beneficial for your committee or for your organization, that will be helpful, and they will be. I will make sure the need topic or a specific point where you.
Yeah. Well, I have to be honest. I have kept it very specific because I didn't want to get into huge debate. So the whole time,
Exactly.
It's the same question I've been asking. What is the plans for communicating and carrying out community consultations in community languages? That has been my main topic the whole time, and I just can't get any answers, and I'm just looking for a strategy or any sort of plan for that, because I just feel it's going to get overlooked again. And I have kept it very simple, that question, every single meeting. That is what we're focusing on, because it's fundamental to everything else. But I appreciate you coming today, and you know, we are going to record this meeting, so I'm interested to hear what Neve has to say about community engagement. I'm sure Hounslow, well, I know Hounslow actually offer a lot more quality service in terms of their consultations, and I just think it'd be really good if there was some sort of balance, and if Ealing could raise their game to at least offer something similar to what Hounslow does. But
sorry, in terms of community engagement.
In terms of community engagement, and the simple fact of they offer the ability that if someone wants to know about planning information, they can phone a number, they can have someone translate, or they can speak another language. It's just Ealing doesn't offer this facility, and I think it should be in some way as multicultural and diverse as Ealing, and thinking of all the developments in Southall, the consultations don't offer that. And I just think there should be some sort of quality level or assurance from Ealing Council of the basics that community consultations will be offered in community languages.
Right. Okay. I will take your message away, as I said to you, and I will make sure what we can do and who will be available for the next meeting.
Okay, that'd be lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Neve, this brings you in very nicely. Thank you very much for joining us today. And
Yeah.
I expect, you know, what we want to know really is, with your engagement lead at Hounslow Council for the regeneration of estates in Hounslow. I know you've started on an engagement program for the Covent Way estate. And yeah, what we're really interested today is to know about how in your consultations you make sure that people are from all different backgrounds and speak different languages are included in the engagement process. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about Hounslow's strategy for that, or the actual mechanisms to ensure that you reach everyone and everyone is included and is understanding and familiar with the process.
Right, so I'll just give you a little bit of background. So the council itself has a centralised communication and consultation team that sits very much in the heart of the council. We're a little bit of separate to that. So alongside that, the housing service also does a level of consultation, and my team is part of the housing service. And back in I have to get my years because the years now started to merge into one. Back in January 2020, the council set up its estate regeneration programme. And it went to the January committee, and 6 priority estates were identified as in priority need of regeneration. But part of the decision to set up the programme is that each of these estates would need to go through a consultation process, and there needed to be a resident ballot before we moved on to developing any regeneration plans. And so that happened in January. They had one meeting on Covent Place in February, and then COVID hit. So everything closed down. So what Hounslow did in the meantime is it then recruited its estate regeneration team. And it's a very small team of 4. And one of the roles within the regeneration team was a dedicated communication and engagement lead, which is my position. So the interesting thing is everybody in that team was new to Hounslow. So we came to Hounslow in the middle of COVID, mainly working from home, and not having all those links with the rest of the council. So we've been building those links up. But also what that meant is that when we were starting, is we've kind of probably brought a more fresh approach, because we hadn't got people to say, oh, we've done that before and it hadn't worked element of it. So we have 2 projects that currently we're running. One's at Charlton Halby House in Brentford, which is a small estate of 74 homes. And then we've got the larger Covent Way, in which there are 411 properties, but actually there's only 406 homes and there's 6 shops on that. And we were given the task that we needed to do the consultation, and then which will result in a ballot. Hounslow has an ambitious target of building 1,000 social rented homes, and our 2 developments are part of that commitment as well. So apart from regenerating, re-providing the homes on the estate, there would be an increase of homes on both of those estates. What happened when we got the team together is we didn't come with any preconceived ideas about Hounslow, because we, as I said, we were all new to Hounslow. And so it was about us building up the picture. And also we were under the restrictions of COVID. Luckily we started in July, so we had between July and September where at least we could do some in-person events, but we have spent half of our consultation on the lockdown. And what we were very much, and you will understand, is that there was a degree of mistrust between the residents and the council. Both the estates had a need of regeneration work and had felt they hadn't received the attention they needed in previous years. So there was a lot of building up trust. One of the bonuses of part of our team is we were actually have a dedicated housing management team attached to us. So we have 4 members of staff, a manager and 3 members of staff, manager and 2 housing staff, and they were chosen particularly for their person skills. So that was a new team that was put together to help, and they actually deliver a lot of the in-person and on the estate, and they build up all the relationships. And it really, I mean, I worked in regeneration on various authorities, and often you're working despite the housing department because they're off doing their bit, but we're actually, the housing department staff here was very much integral into part of what we were delivering, and have delivered a lot of the regeneration on the ground. And been able to build up relationships, which has been good because they'll be able to deal with, as you will be aware, people come to a meeting and they've got other questions that need asking, and we're able to kind of do that holistic, 360-degree support for residents. I don't know if you know the two areas. So Charlton House and Covent Way are actually are very stable communities. Majority of people on both estates have lived there quite a long time. So we had maybe over 60% of residents living on the estate for over 20 years. Both estates have high BAME residents, so around about 2/3 of the residents come from a BME community. And also there's quite a high percentage of older people on the estate because of the length of tenancies that people have, and we have lots of intergenerational families as well, because it's very hard for children to go out and buy properties or actually be rehoused by the council. Covent Way has 1/3 of right to buys, of which half of them are resident and half of them, about 45% are non-resident. So we did have a group of people who don't have any whose rights are less because they don't have security of tenure, or they're not a resident, not a leaseholder. So what did we do? Well, actually, right from the beginning, we decided that we actually needed to know more about the residents. So what we did is we built up an individual profile of each of the residents on both estates, and this is where it was very labour intensive. And we did that through looking at the data the council already had as part of our housing management information, which has its limitations because not everybody always updates it. But then we also carried out a housing needs survey, and it was asking about questions about what is your language needs, what's your support needs, what are your disabilities, what are the barriers for you to get involved, and there was questions specifically around COVID restrictions as well. So that we actually then we started a database, so we could track the involvement of every single resident on both estates, whether it was that through telephone, doing feedback, if they come to a session, that we could track that. And the useful thing about that is that if we weren't getting people out, we could then look at what the trends are. Was that to do with languages? Was that to do with accessibility? Was actually, discover actually some people weren't at home, either under COVID, they'd gone away to stay with relatives. So it was about building up that picture so we could know exactly who was being involved and who was not. And often when you do engagement through the traditional ways of just having a meeting and sending out leaflets, you get the same range of people coming to meetings, where we were able to, through the process, to actually track who wasn't being engaged and then look to ways to engage those people. The other thing we also did is we looked to see how we could engage the residents on the ground. So at Covent Way, there was a resident steering group, which wasn't traditionally like a resident steering group where you have a very limited number. It was a very flexible membership. We had about 36 households volunteer, and it was sometimes you've got one person from the household, sometimes you've got 3 or 4 people from the household, and we very much use that as a sounding board for the engagement with the testing, and they were a very good source of information about which parts of communities were not getting involved in that. And at Charlton House, they had an established tenants association that we also worked through. Because the thing is, when you come to estates and you have a large BAME community, it's people making assumptions that there needs to be a level of translation, there needs to be what information. And what we did is actually ask the groups and with the information we got about how they wanted information. So So on Covent Way, there's a very good established Somali women's group, and they were very much saying to us, actually, doing written translation wasn't effective. The majority of residents who needed translation were the older population, and particularly older females, and that their literacy skills wasn't very good. And actually, they needed to have conversations with similar residents, and so we offered very much. We had a bank of resident translators who were known to people, who were available to come and do that translation face to face or over the telephone for that group of people, and get them very engaged in the process, to understand that was good. But we also used our traditional council service, whether that was via Zoom or telephone, or we did have some in face to face. We offered BSL. We've got a number of residents needing BSL on Covent Way, and they came down and did that services. But we also looked about what the support was needed, other than just, so what was the barriers? A lot of it was about accessibility. People didn't want to come out of their homes, and whether we then were delivering services over the telephone or via Zoom. We found out quite soon that although people had access to and were willing to come to Zoom meetings, we had a quite high percentage of people were willing to do that, and we did hold some just sessions in Somalia or in Gujarati, but actually the majority of people were accessing Zoom meetings from their phone. There's very few, so if people did have a tablet or a computer, it was very much in demand for being used by children to do schoolwork and stuff like that. So we had to very much think about when we were delivering those Zoom sessions, so it was when people were having doing schoolwork, but very much be aware that when we were doing things like presentations, that the majority of people were looking on the phone and they didn't have actually a laptop. So about how what information we were producing on that. So there was kind of the three elements. So there was the in person. So we had a number of a program of in person and Zoom sessions, which were held over the period. And so people could choose which way to come. They could come in person if they felt safe enough to come to the community centre. A lot of our events were held outside, or they could do it over Zoom, or they could do it over the telephone, or they could come and do one-to-one appointments. Even when we went into lockdown, we still had a presence on both estates. We were still either at the community centre or the Regen shop, even though we couldn't open the doors, and we were holding Zoom sessions and telephone meetings. But people could come and see us, and people felt a bit more comfortable with the fact that they knew we're still there, that we hadn't abandoned them during that period, even though we couldn't open the door to actually speak to them face to face. They could wave at us as they were going past the building, and people felt at least through that we were still having that presence, that it hadn't been abandoned during lockdown. And we did lots of one-on-one appointments for availability. We also did the traditional literature, but we increased the amount of literature that was going through. And as I said, what our residents were saying to us, that they didn't want a lot of literature translated. So we did do targeted posters in certain languages when we were holding specialist events just for that particular group. And we did, because we knew which people on the estate needed translations, we were able to do targeted translated letters directly to them. But we also produce a lot of literature. So when people couldn't come out to events, we produced comprehensive brochures, and these were very much pictorial. So they didn't need to have a lot of text in them, so people still could understand the consultation events without having that much of having that text to do that. And we supplemented that through online surveys and printed surveys. So in terms of the outcome, so that was kind of, this is covering the kind of the first stage of the consultation. We're now moving into the second stages. Both on Covent Way and Charlton House, we had to hold a residence ballot. and both were successful. But in terms of contact, on Covent Way, we had 93% contact of all residents, and that included non-resident leaseholders. So we could track that we had spoken to 93% of everybody who lived on the estate or owned a property on the estate during all of the consultation process. Of residents who lived there on Covent Way, 94% had provided either some feedback, attended an event, or come to a one-to-one appointment, be that virtual or in person. And when it came to the ballot, 85.5% actually voted in the ballot, which is one of the highest turnouts. And we had 71% people, including leaseholders and tenants, complete the housing needs survey. Over at Charlton House, the smaller estate, the contact was a little higher, was 96%. The only people we hadn't contacted was one person who was away in Spain, and two of the non-resident leaseholders were the only three people that we didn't speak to. And 97% of the eligible people who lived on the estate and the leaseholders actually came to an event. We had 91% of people complete the housing needs survey, and 81% of the eligible residents actually voted in the ballot, which was also very good. Good turnout. So that's been the first stage. We're now moving into the second stage, which is including expanding the consultation area. So we're now putting together the programme to what the wider community is going to be, because it's been very much focused on the residents on the estate. At Charlton House, we're somewhere down that line. So we now, so back in early September, we sent out an invite to 2,500 homes and 100 businesses within the immediate area. It's quite a wide area of Charlton House, to invite people to come and speak to us or visit the website or contact us by phone or Zoom. And then just last week, we sent out the invitation to the public exhibition that we're holding for the next 4 weeks. So people can come in. It's often Tuesday and Wednesday, 10 till 7 each day for people to come in, or they can view it, or we can send them printed copies in terms of that. So we've just widened that wider communications out over there, and we'll just putting together what that wider consultation programme is going to look like for Covent Way, which will probably be kicking off at the end of November, as we expand the consultation programme to include the neighbourhood. Any questions about that? It's about 10 minutes.
Well, first of all, that sounds very impressive, and your rates in the percentages of the amount of residents that you managed to engage, that's really impressive, particularly in such a difficult setting with COVID. And so that sounds very good. And also that was really interesting, you were saying about people there, you brought in translators and the different ways you engage people when they didn't respond to something, you find a different way. So all in all, yeah, I mean, that sounds very impressive, and that's why it's so interesting to think about what we can learn from your approach in terms of Ealing and the consultations they're going to carry out.
It's labour intensive, and I know the movement of councils is reducing staff. Well, what we've found, and the rest of the consultation and communication section are seeing us as good practices. Actually, the quality of consultation and engagement that we had was much better, because people felt they could come and get engaged, and they could speak to us and could understand more of the process. And when you just run the traditional ways of, I've done consultation where you've run a monthly meeting and you may get 50 or 60 people there who are the same people, and you're going over the same issues in terms of that, is that often you don't get that quality, and you miss out a lot of the some of the history and the needs of the estates. And we were getting, we were drilling down and getting to people who never would have come out to a consultation event, or never would have talked, or would have said it's nothing to do with me. And that was good. I mean, we really do think we got quality involvement. And I have to say, at the end, people were going, right, we've had enough now, can we just vote? And we're like, no, we're going to, you know, we're giving people those 6 weeks of consultation, time for everybody to be able to come back and do feedback, so that you know, so that everybody had that opportunity to come back. And we did the set, you know, approach, whether the estate was 74 properties or 400 properties. We you know, we use the same technique on both estates.
Brilliant.
We are tired. No one's had a holiday since last July.
I bet. Has anyone got a question for Niamh? Sharon?
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
Obviously, if you saw our presentation, we've been doing a lot of work with residents groups who are living on estates where demolition is either promoted or being promoted, or whether the demolition, there has already been a ballot, or things have gone out without a ballot. And I guess sort of one of the things that we've found particularly distressing is not even the kind of levels of consultation in the respect that you've talked about, which sounds very good to me, but the quality of the information that's actually provided. So, for example, in the mayor's has a requirement around the kind of consultation that's carried out prior to balloting, along with having ballots. One of the things that's in his London plan is very clear that a local authority must look at every single other way of bringing homes up to a good standard without demolition. And I wonder, the information that we've seen from a number of estates is actually quite poor, is very narrow in its assessment, and we're not quite clear how well that has. There's a standard way of that being translated to people on estates without giving them the full kind of information, and without them being absolutely aware of that criteria. I'd be interested in what you did around that, and whether that information is on your website.
Right. Well, part of when they were setting up the estate regeneration program, they looked at the alternatives available and the costing of refurbishment. And we have considered that as part of when we were. So we have had architects on board right from the beginning, and we did look at that as well, what the options are. When we spoke to residents, especially on these two estates, the 1960s concrete structures, very much people were actually saying to us that the buildings are just tired. They're not fit for purpose. And when we looked at whether you could, and we had difficulties of the current homes being able to then meet the housing guide. So like at Convent Way, the floor to ceilings weren't high enough. So we could have gone for refurbishment, but actually that would have even made the homes themselves and making people aware that that's one of the issues. We could refurbish the home, but actually that ceiling, like to put soundproofing in, would then take probably another, will reduce it even further down. So there was some complications, and which we talked through with residents about why, and we had considered as part of Common Way whether we should actually retain some of the buildings. But it was having those conversations with residents about saying actually why this then doesn't become feasible, because we have to balance it, because Hounslow has a commitment to zero carbon. And with zero carbon, refurbishment is better than rebuild. So it wasn't necessarily the cost element. It was the fact that the refurbishment on the whole wouldn't have met the standards that are required now of a modern home. And we had to have those discussions. But I have to say, on the whole, the residents of both estates were very much about, they were favouring new build, because they just, because of the condition of the homes that they currently have.
And is that particular consultation around the kind of the alternatives considered, is that available online?
I don't know if it's in any of the consultation reports. I would have to have a look to see the feedback in the consultation reports. But I mean, I know it is that consideration, and I think it's a conversation you have to have with residents right at the beginning, because if you take residents down the line of saying, it was interesting because so when the last exhibition before we went to ballot at Covent Way, we brokered again whether we should keep the tower. And it was kind of so it was part of in the feedback, should we, which building should we retained? And actually very much everybody who lived in the tower was against keeping the tower. And they were saying that's because other people don't live in it. They don't understand what the problems of that tower is. It's got a lot of water issues and repair issues. So it's kind of interesting to see, although some people say, oh, yes, who didn't live in the tower were very much, well, you could keep it. But then the people who were living in the tower was very much, no, it's not fit for purpose. And we were looking at the balance, how we balance that out. And on the whole, once we then looked at how feasible it was to keep the tower, it was like, it wasn't the money issue. It was actually, could we deliver modern standard homes that our residents are now expecting to live in? And would we be delivering, would some people still then be in a substandard home? So we could, would the people in the tower would have been in the substandard accommodation to the new build that we'd be building around them?
Sorry, I didn't want to have a long time conversation with you about justification for one or the other. I just wondered whether, because that's one of the things that we're interested in looking at the moment, is the quality of kind of consultation, or the quality of information that's provided around kind of alternatives and stuff, and whether you had anything in a copy that you could either email to Toby, or whether there was access to it online. That's all really.
Yeah, maybe if you could have a look, Niamh, just maybe send me a link or something if possible, and then I can distribute that. So I'm just going to say hello to, I've seen about 10 minutes ago, and we were joined by Councillor Dr. Aisha Raza, whose cabinet role is tackling equality. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And also Councillor Sheetal Monroe, whose role in the cabinet is now good growth. So thank you very much for joining us. Councillor Tariq Mahmood was here earlier, but he didn't really have much of an update in terms of, excuse me, in terms of plans for the consultation for Ealing to produce the local housing plan. But yeah, it's great that you can hear, you heard Niamh talking about her engagement in Hounslow for the regeneration of estates, because we're hoping that some of the principles of engagement will be used for the consultation moving forward. And Tariq did say to me, what specifically are we looking for at this meeting? And what we want is just really a commitment to, or some sort of strategy for engaging people from BAME backgrounds, or people who don't speak English as a first language, that first and foremost. So we're hoping that maybe some of the principles from Hounslows consultations might be used there. So, but thank you for joining us. Who's Sheetal, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead.
So I think you were looking for an update on Ealing's plans for consultation on local
there was
plan.
one. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I'm responsible for the local plan as part of my portfolio. We have a process in place. We will be launching sometime second or third week of November a whole consultation strategy. First of all, it'll be sort of at a higher level. Then it will drift down to the 7 towns of Ealing, Perivale, Greenford, etc. So we're going to try using all methods, social media, surveys, whatever. We also have our local planned advisory panel. They'll be looking at the different topics. So that plan is also set aside. And then we have a sort of an outside organization helping us in terms of some of the processes, but you will see it's going to kick off in a big way from November onwards as to our consultation. And I will feed back this idea of other languages. I'll do that. I think that's important. I'll see what Hounslow did, and I'll maybe try and follow that example. But most members of the community will have an opportunity to take part, give their views first at a higher level in terms of what they want to see from in Ealing, how they want their borough to develop, all the different issues, and then it will slowly come down to more and more details until we get our what's called Reg 18 consultation, which is the official consultation starting sometime in April, May next year. And then we'll do the Reg 18 stuff, and then we'll come up with a draft local plan, and then people would be able to comment on it, and everybody would be able to say. So it's going to be a really open, transparent process this time round to make sure that everybody can see what the issues are, can see what the problems might be, what concerns they've got. But I'm really keen that all members of the community have an ability to input and can see what's there. Yeah, so that is what's happening. There has been some work done beforehand, but we really needed to just reset because, as you know, there's a new administration started in May, and we've got different priorities, so we've had to reset some of it. And now you'll see what we think is what the community needs is a proper, open, transparent consultation. And as me and Peter have said, it's better we disagree in public than not talk at all. So there may be things that people are not happy with, but we're happy to have that debate openly, publicly. We may not always agree, and in planning and in regeneration, that's always the case, but we want to have that real debate with members of the residents, members of the public, community organizations, etc., to make sure that they are consulted, that their views are taken on board. But a consultation doesn't mean a vote. It's not an election. It is a consultation, and we may agree with some stuff, we may disagree with some stuff, but overall, they should be satisfied that they had every chance to take part and be consulted on what Ealing's local plan will look like for the next 20 to 30 years, which will guide development in the borough in all different guises, design guide, where development would take place, where we'd increase industrial land, how we would manage our open spaces, and all the rest of it. It's a really very comprehensive document. It's not been updated in the past. People may be aware that we hadn't done an AMR. I've got that done. It's on our website. It's an interim one because there was some information still missing, and I insisted that we couldn't delay anymore. We had to publish what we've got, and we've done that. So it's there now so people can see. And hopefully by December, we'll have the final version, and then we will update the interim to a final version, and it will be there. So we've done a lot of work since May to get to a point where people can see what the issues are and where we are. And you will get a chance now to really comment on emerging proposals. At the moment, they would only be emerging because nothing's decided, and we want to do it in an open and transparent way. So that's what we'll be doing. Thank you.
Well, that sounds very promising. Linda, you've got your hand up.
Yes, sorry, just to introduce myself, and sorry for joining late. I've been at another meeting. I'm Councillor Linda Burke, and I'm on the local plan group. I'm one of the councillors on that. I think just to add to what Sheetal said, though, one of the challenges we've got is that quite a lot of what's emerging from the local plan is how we feed that into current processes, because obviously what we don't want to do is have to wait until 2024 and at the very end. So for example, we've got a character study that's being developed and is well in progression. And it's really important. I think one of our jobs as backbench councillors there is actually to make sure those are fed in, because I mean, you may have been aware, like last night, for example, something went through planning committee, but actually, if you look at some of the emerging things from the character study, it doesn't really fit with it. So I think, Chantal, to come back a little bit, whilst we do need to be inclusive and we do need to make sure the consultation is wide, we also need to make sure that the things that are really coming out strongly as themes within that local plan, we don't wait till the very end, because otherwise we could find that we have loads and loads of inappropriate buildings being approved, and actually in 2 years' time, the local plan's saying they shouldn't have been approved, or they weren't part of how we want Ealing to look. So I think that's a challenge for us as all councillors, but particularly as backbenchers, to make sure that things that are emerging through the local plan are being fed into the planning committee education and training process, because at the moment there's a time lag with that, and that's not really happening. So we just need to make that happen.
I would say that that has happened, because the last local plan panel looked at the design guide. That will now go on to our website, and planners will have to take account of the new design guide that's come forward. So some of that work, that's why we released design guide early, so it could go on to our website as part of our planning process. So our planning officers will have to take guidance from that design guide when they're deciding applications, and we'll try and do that with some of the other work that's ongoing. So if we can, we will put it up into the public arena and on our website. And so it hasn't gone on yet. And
No.
Libby Kemp's just...
And that's right. It was ignored last night. Yeah, it was ignored last night. That's right.
So, but we are trying to get it in early rather than wait till the end when the plan is actually approved. The planners have to give it less weight, but they have to give it some weight.
Yeah.
By giving the guidance there, it's not a fully approved plan, so you can't give it the same weight as you would the London plan, which has been approved. But our guidance would have planning merit, a weight in that, but not the full amount. So there's always a balance.
So Chantal, I totally agree with everything you're saying, and I don't want to turn it into a debate, but being on the planning committee and on the local plan, there's definitely a time lag in terms, things are being decided, which I know from being on the local plan group are actually out of kilter. So I think you're absolutely right that we're doing it. All I'm saying is we need to do it much, much quicker, so that those councillors that are on the planning committee are fully appraised of the direction of travel from a local plan, and so that the community is also fully appraised of the direction of travel.
I'm only there since May, Linda. I'm sorry. I can only do what I can.
Has anyone got any other questions for Chantal?
I think Libby's speaking, but she's on mute. Libby, you're on mute.
Rena's got a question.
Oh, yeah. I just had a question. Coming off Linda's point, where it's kind of like I'm slightly worried because a lot of developments are going through in Southall right now, for example, without a local plan that's been updated for many, many years. And the buildings in Southall are incredibly tall. So if, for example, like Linda says, a local plan informs that buildings that are very tall need to have, greater insight from the community and stuff like that, and then these buildings are just going through without any insight from the community, it is upsetting as well for people in Southall, because we're kind of being told that there's no local plan that's recent that's informing these planning decisions by planning officers, and that everything is kind of going off London plan policy. So I think on Linda's point, there is a kind of urgency in terms of us trying to work out some kind of guidelines to give planning officers, because right now there doesn't really seem to be much in terms of getting the community involved. And that is a really big worry, especially in Southall, where multiple tall buildings are being erected right now. In London, this year, there's been a reduction in tall buildings across London. Around 100 have been approved. I know in Southall on Merrick Road, there are at least 7 or like 8 around that area that are being approved in that one like 2-3 road radius. So can you imagine throughout the whole of London how many tall buildings are just concentrated in Southall, and then how little local plan policy is being involved in that? It's incredibly worrying.
Well, I hate. Okay, the issue is when we gained a position in May, first thing the leader did was write to the Mayor of London to remove Southall from the Southall opportunity area. In the previous local plan, Southall and parts of Southall were put into this opportunity area where development was to be encouraged. And what we've done is change policy away from becoming what we would say being a dormitory town to being Ealing being a place where people not only live but work as well. And you may have heard about the 20-minute city, where people would have access to all facilities within 20 minutes of where they live, in terms of work, in terms of other community facilities, etc. So Peter wrote to the mayor saying we would like to pull Southall out from the Southall Opportunity Area framework. We've not had a reply back, but we are chasing that up. And as part of the new local plan, we have a different view of how Southall should develop. But unfortunately, planning policy and planning, the way the planning system works is it's based on policies, and it's based on what's happened in the past. So we have to follow the London plan. So our local plan has to be in alignment with the London plan. Otherwise, the London plan would override us. And obviously the London plan has to be in alignment with the national planning framework, because that's how the system works. It's hierarchical. But yes, Rima, you are right. We are aware that that's happened, but that is the process at the moment. But we are trying to change it, and that's all I can say.
I know Libby wants to speak, but I just have one more point to make on that. So I understand what you're saying, but then, for example, a lot of tall building applications are informed by pre-application conversations with the council that are paid for through a consultation fee through the council. And I read the council's policy on pre-applications, which says that consultations were made through local groups as well as councillors. And I also have read the guideline book for planning officers in relation to pre-application processes, which says that local councillors should be involved in nearly every stage of pre-application conversations with developers. I sit in the community review panel, and a developer was obviously talking about a development that they want to bring to the planning committee, and that they want to bring as a planning notice and give to the council in the very final stages. And I asked the developer during the pre-application process, which local groups did they contact? They only told me one. The other groups they mentioned were Ealing Council and Greater London Authority. So it's not really following your own policy. Like, the planning officer in that meeting didn't follow the policy that Ealing have on their website about pre-applications, or the policy in guidelines for planning officers. So multiple developments in Southall have had pre-application conversations where Southall councillors have not been involved, or local groups have not been consulted, even though those two things are points made in planning policy in both London plan policy and Ealing's own plan policy in relation to pre-application conversations.
I'm not sure how you want me to answer that, because I don't know what the scheme was. I don't know when it happened, at what stage. I think that's pretty, I mean, you can make a public comment, but it doesn't give any value, because I have no understanding of what occurred, when it occurred, and it could have occurred a year ago, it could have occurred 3 weeks ago, I don't know. So how do you expect me to answer something I don't know anything about? Because you could have written to me, or you could have, you have my contact details, you could have, honestly, spoken to me beforehand.
it's not something as much that I want you to answer. It's something I'm making you aware of, because I think.
Well, I'm not even aware that that's what's happened, because the person at that meeting may not be aware of all the consultations that have taken place. I don't know. I just don't think that's relevant, in a sense of just coming out and just saying something without any sort of understanding of where it happened, when it happened, and what the issues were.
Libby, do you want to?
Yeah, so that brings up another point. So you're supposed to allow members of the public access to all the notes and minutes of the pre-application meetings with the planning officers once the planning application appears on the website. You can try as hard as you like, but you don't get them. So that needs to be looked at. And that's really
okay. And that's a helpful point. That's something we can look at. Yes.
The second thing is another planning that was development that was passed last night. It was admitted by the planning officer that it had inadequate amenity space. Now, this isn't the first time recently something's gone through with inadequate amenity space. Percival House is a huge example of it. So when are we going to have it that, as part of the development plan, adequate amenity space is actually part of it? It is really important that we have grass and trees, not bits of concrete, and places for people to play. And the third thing is the authority monitoring reports, which are probably in some respects more important than the local plan, because with the 5-year land use, that tells you how much you can build and what you've built already, and we are overdeveloping. So when we actually get the final document, will it look like every other borough's as a spreadsheet, or we have something like this 136 pages of closely typed text that you have to sort through to find out what you want? Other boroughs produce this as a one-page spreadsheet for each year, and they're very easy to read. And I suggest you look at Wandsworth, even though they're a Tory council, because it's absolutely perfect and very easy to understand. And that's what we need, so that people can look at the AMR and say, well, actually, in Southall, they've overbuilt, they've given permission over 25%, or they've overbuilt. We need to leave off Southall for a bit, or whatever. And that's what the AMR is supposed to do. And we can't use it the way it is at the moment. I mean, quite honestly, it was an essay on planning policy, which should become as an adjunct at the end of it, or as an appendix, or somewhere else. It needn't be explained. The AMR is supposed to be figures, not 136 pages of type. And as you know, we took you to the Ombudsman for that, and we've waited 32 times we have requested this in the last 3 years.
It's almost 5:30. Can we have a commitment to simple language and a one-pager like Wandsworth Council? Can we have a commitment to that?
No, I don't think you can, because there is notes at the beginning which explain each of the chapters and explains what they cover. So we've tried to do a summary.
No, I understand that, Councillor Munro. I understand that. But
I'm very sorry. It's a very, very complex area. It covers many, many important areas of the work on the local plan. I would try and see if we can do something about making it much more readable, but I can't guarantee that one page would cover it. I'm sorry.
We understand you have to have the text explaining it. What we want is the figures on one sheet, like the other boroughs do.
Well, it would help if figures weren't, shall we say, misused, which is why we have to give all the explanation with it. Because what we find is that people deliberately misuse the figures, and that is not something I'm willing to tolerate.
Sorry, but we haven't had any figures to use for them since 2004.
Well, I'm sorry, you claim that Ealing Council built 37,000 homes publicly, and I think if we'd built 37,000 homes in the last 5 or 6 years, you would soon know about that.
I'm sorry, we didn't. We said you had given planning permission for 30.
No. That was after we reminded you that fact.
It was always planning permission. We know about that.
Look,
anyway.
Permissions doesn't mean a build, okay? No. I always say to people...
We know that.
Well, then why did you claim that they did?
We did not. We said you had given permission for 37,000 applications. That's what we've said. Always.
And how many did we build?
I can't remember.
Well, yeah, that's the more important point, isn't it? You can't remember the point, which is the most important point for families who are waiting for homes, is how many were actually built. And
I can probably go another month if you give me 10 minutes.
Well, they were in the region of 9,000 during that period. And so 9,000 families would have had a new home. And that is a very good thing to have. But that didn't meet our targets that we were set by the GLA and the national government.
But I'm sure that your AMRs will show it.
Yes, they will. And that's why we publish it.
In simple fashion, so we don't have to read 136 pages.
I'm really sorry, Libby, but it's important. If people wouldn't misuse the figures, I'd be more willing to make it simple, but people misuse the figures.
We understand the build figures, and I don't know why we had to ask why it wasn't produced every year either. As I've said to you, I was not in a position to influence that decision. I only came into post in May, and you've got the AMR published.
Okay, it is now just gone 5:30. It's been very interesting.
I joined late. I had other meetings.
No worries. Thank you very much. I want to big thanks to everyone who attended today and our presenters. Thanks to Neve from Hounslow Council and also Ealing councillors, Chantal Monroe. Thank you very much for joining. And I look forward to seeing everyone in January.
Thank you.
Big thanks to Sharon too. Thanks everyone. Bye. Bye.